Hi everyone, it's Michael, and I am so excited as well as very nervous to formally begin my exploration of water culture. Now, this is going to be a multiple video series because, quite frankly, I'm not sure how I feel about water culture quite yet. But I do want to speak to why I'm exploring it now. And the real reason is because I've accidentally been using it for many of my plants. Now, if you've seen my rehabilitating dehydrated orchids video, which if you haven't, I will link it below, it is a form of water culture that I use to stimulate root growth. And I do it for a lot of my Phalaenopsis orchids when they're struggling. And then I discovered just accidentally that I have been doing water culture with a lot of my plants. For example, my Potinara recently unpotted itself from semi-hydroponics. It quite literally fell out of the container because it just was not adapting. So I had it sitting out in the air for an extended period of time, and then I realized the bulbs were becoming desiccated. So I put it in water for a couple days, and then I would take it out. I was just giving it a pronounced wet and dry cycle. But it responded so quickly and so positively to that I started to get really curious about water culture. Now, I am going to take you in and show you the plants that I have already converted into water culture, but this video is primarily going to be discussion based because what I want to cover is really why I want to pursue or really explore water culture, and also some of the considerations that I think need to be in place before anyone tries it. Now, I do think it's important to qualify what exactly water culture is in case you're not familiar. So water culture is a form of orchid cultivation in which the plants are completely bare root. You are not using any potting medium of any variety. The bare roots are in direct contact with water. Those are the two factors that you have going on. Now, having said that, there are two core categorizations within water culture. You have full water culture, and that consists of about 1/3 of your plant's root system sitting in water all the time, round the clock. So 7 days a week, about 1/3 of your root system is sitting in water. That's full water culture. And then you have semi-water culture, and that offers more of a pronounced wet and dry cycle. And so it generally consists of plants having about 2/3 of their root system submerged in water for 2 full days, and then you give them a dry period of about 5 days. So 2-5 is the frequency with semi-water culture. Full water culture is 7 days a week. So let's start with what I find appealing about this system. And it's actually quite similar to what I find appealing about semi-hydroponics, which is that I get to visually track and monitor the development and progression of the root systems of my plants. That is probably the single most appealing thing about water culture to me. And it's even more amplified than it is in semi-hydroponics because in semi-hydro, you see some of the roots as they kind of make contact with the glass on the outside perimeter of the plant. But with water culture, you see the entire thing. The other thing I find really appealing about water culture is if there is root rot, if there is any kind of, debris, any kind of problem that might arise, it's instantaneous and immediate access to the root system without having to really traumatize it by unpotting it and wrestling away medium. This implies that it might be a very clean system, and it might also really, really facilitate plant divisions. One of the things that I'm struggling with right now in my collection in semi-hydroponics is some of my plants have become so well established that when I have to go to unpot them, it's a real struggle because, the leca is tightly bound with the root system. The root system is tightly bound in the container, and I just have the damnedest time getting them out. So I find it appealing for that reason as well. Just being forward thinking and thinking about how really healthy plants establish, it might be really nice to be able to just pull it straight out of a glass container, clip it down the middle, let it dry, and then replant it into water culture. It would also facilitate treatments if necessary, whether I'm using, Captain Jack's dead bug or whether I'm using hydrogen peroxide. It's nice to have immediate access to the root system without having to worry about whether or not the medium will dry or whether or not the medium will accumulate some of that pesticide or whatever is being used. So there's a lot of reasons to be inclined to do it. Now, one other reason that I find really appealing, and I can't substantiate this yet, that's why this is part 1 of a video series, is that I think that it might allow me to manipulate temperature more readily for my cool growing orchids. So plants that I've had and failed with before, like my Nellie Eiler, plants that I'm not doing great with now, like my Miltoniopsis, they require cool growing conditions, and I've always struggled to give them that. But because water is such a temperature sensitive medium, if I put it next to the window and the windows get cool and that water kind of conducts the cold temperature to the root system, I'm curious to know if it might allow me to manipulate temperature a little bit more effectively. So these are the core reasons why I want to explore water culture. Now, having said all of that, I do think that it's important to qualify what I believe are the stipulations that need to be in place before you try water culture, because there are quite a few. And the first big one would really be that this is a grow method that I think is for seasoned growers. Now you may try it and have incredible luck and just do really well, and more power to you, sis. But I do think that as a general rule of thumb, if I had tried water culture as my introductory offer when I was starting to care for orchids, I am certain I would have murdered every single plant I came in contact with, because it really is a delicate balance. You have to understand their preferences. You have to understand the temperament of these plants. So I think if I had just tried this with no real frame of reference for how to care for orchids, I would just drown these plants and immediately kill them. So I do think this is something that you want to try after you have been growing orchids for an extended period of time. Whether that's in classic bark medium, whether that's semi-hydroponically, however you want to grow, just get familiar with how your plants behave and what they want. I think that is critical and foundational knowledge to have going into trying water culture. I also think it assumes that you need to have very high quality water, because again, if the two big factors are the roots and the water, you have to be using high quality water, because I mean, God, if I had tried to do water culture when I was living in Los Angeles with how hard the tap water was, which came in with a TDS in excess of 400, that also probably would have killed it. Even if I executed it flawlessly, the water quality probably would have compromised all of my plants. So you have to be sure that you're using exceptionally high quality water if you're going to do water culture. The other consideration I'm thinking of is algae. I don't anticipate it's going to be a problem, because I mean, life finds a way, and it hasn't been a problem in semi-hydroponics, but I am growing in a method that is using fully clear, fully transparent containers. So I wonder if there's a possibility that, because algae grows in the presence of sunlight and nutrients, both of which will be present in this grow environment, I'm wondering if the algae might over inundate the roots. So that's something to watch and monitor. Another critical consideration is environment. For example, I don't think I would have been very successful growing in water culture when I lived in Colorado, because Colorado gets very, very cold. It snows a lot. And if my plants are all in the window, again, water is such a beautiful conductor for temperature, that I do think that these tropical plants that generally prefer tepid to lukewarm water would not like the freezing cold water. It would probably kill them as well. So you have to think critically about what your environment is. For that same reason, I do believe that this is more of an indoor growing method rather than an outdoor growing method. It just seems like if you put them directly outside, they are too susceptible to environmental swings and you lose a bit of that control. And the last major consideration is true of any time you repot any plant into any method. You want to make sure that it's in great health going into the transition, because if a plant doesn't have the energy to support new root growth, to sustain its healthy development in a new system, it might just give up. So the same rules apply with every other potting method. You want to see that there's new growth. You want to see that there are at least a few leads on new roots, so that it really has an opportunity to develop into a healthy plant. But I do think that a lot of people try water culture with plants that are unhealthy and then think that it's water culture that killed them, but the plant might have already been on its way out to begin with. Now, these are just the stipulations that have occurred to me going into it without having a lot of experience with water culture. So please take everything I say with a grain of salt. Understand that this is experimental and I am exploring and learning how these plants will behave. But that is kind of my framework. That is my jumping off point for my interactions with water culture and this new grow method. Now, having said all of that, let's take a closer look at some of the plants that I have already converted to water culture. And again, some of those conversions were accidental and some of them have been intentional. But it is a small assortment of plants to start, so let's take a look. All right, friends, so let's start with the ones that I potted accidentally into water culture. So this would be my Vanda and my Ascocenda. So these were the first to go into this method. And it's because I was just not keeping up with their watering needs when it came to basket culture. I would just forget them and then they would dry up. I actually lost a flower spike on my Ascocenda because I just kept forgetting to water it. So you can see that I'm currently doing these in full water culture, but I do think that they might be better suited to semi-water culture. So I might just start filling it up higher to a place where most of their root system is covered, letting them sit for 2 days and then leaving them dry for 5 days. I just want to make sure that that suits their schedule and also mine, because I'm just forgetful. So I'm hoping that'll work out for them, but you can see they seem to be doing really, really well. Now, another one that I mentioned was my Potinara. This one happened accidentally because this plant, again, quite literally unpotted itself from semi-hydroponics. It just never really established in that grow method. So I just had it sitting out in open air. The pseudobulbs started to desiccate, but I ended up actually dividing this plant into 4 plants. I have 1 potted in classic bark, I have 1 potted in semi-hydroponics, I have 1 potted in water culture, and then I have another potted in sphagnum moss. So I'm actually doing a bit of an experiment, which I will showcase later. But already I do think that water culture might be the front runner method, because look at what it's done ever since I've put it into this grow method. And it's only been about 2 weeks. It has just gone nuts putting out these new roots. And I don't know if you can tell, but the roots themselves are beginning to branch. So that's really, really wonderful and special. And again, this was purely accidental. I just realized that the pseudobulbs were desiccating, so they needed some water. So I did this as a temporary solution, and it's the first time it started to succeed as long as I've had it. So that's really exciting. Over this way, I have my Miltonia Sunset. Now, I will tell you, this is a division of my Miltonia Sunset. I recently unpotted and divided it. I would not put any plants that have been in my collection for a long period of time in this grow method, because I'm just not sure how they would respond and I don't want to kill them. So this does strike me more as something to explore when you have divisions of existing plants, when you have newer plants that you're not super intimately tied to or married to. So this is a division, and you know, it seems to be doing pretty darn good. So we'll see how that progresses. Over this way, I have my Miltoniopsis. And again, this one has only been in water culture for about 2 weeks, but look at these new roots. Look at it go. It is much happier than I've ever seen it. So that's a big win. Over this way, I have my Cattleya pedunculata. This one is super cute. It's one of the newest ones in my collection. And I believe it's actually number 66 in the collection. But this one also seems to be doing quite well. It likes this grow method. It's getting plenty of air, but it's also getting plenty of water. Over here, I have my Sergioara, and my Sergioara is also doing really well. I don't know if you can tell, but there is a lot of new root growth if you come in straight to the bottom. The root system is a little bit different colored than I'm accustomed to, so the new leads on roots are kind of brownish, but it is actually doing quite well, and it's quite plump. So that's very positive. And then the last one I'll show you is my Brasileia Cattleya. So I don't know if you've noticed, these are all the newest additions to my collection. So I have 66, 67, and 68. So these are newer ones. I'm not super intimately tied to them, but same story here. And this one also has brown root tips on new growths. It seems to be really acclimating just fine. So I'm so curious to see how this progresses, but so far things look very, very promising. And with that, that's pretty much it. I am so excited to see how this progresses. I am so excited to become more proficient and capable at this grow method. And I think that one of the most exciting things about this for me is that it's another tool in my toolkit. One of the biggest lessons as an orchid grower this year that I've experienced is you cannot blanket statement your approach to your plants, because if you do, your ability to grow diverse plants is going to be significantly limited. Some of my plants love semi-hydro. Some of them do not care for it. Some of my plants are in classic medium and will never do well in other methods. You really have to, I don't want to say you have to, I would strongly encourage you to develop your skill set in growing in a variety of methods, because these are highly diverse plants that require highly diverse things. Okay, so I've said enough now, I'm done babbling. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me. If you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, go ahead and leave it in the comment section below. Be sure to support one another in the comment section, because I'm so seldom available to do so. Don't forget to click subscribe, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Mwah! Bye, friends.